Our journey begins in the small coastal foggy town of Jonesport, Maine. We arrive here late afternoon and set up. This is a privately owned campground nestled right on the coast. Jonesport is a lobster and fishing community located about an hour south of the Canadian border. The fog is eerie, but it makes this landscape so much more dynamic. My wife Renee is joining us on this trip, along with our pups, Nora and Bivy. We'll be cruising through Newfoundland in our 2021 Jeep Gladiator Sport S and our X-Venture XV3 trailer. Being on the coast of the colder North Atlantic is getting me really excited. 4 years ago when we came through Nova Scotia, it was one of the best trips we had taken thus far. Tomorrow we cross into Canada and begin our overland journey through Newfoundland. From our home in Kentucky, this is going to start with an 1,860-mile trek into New Brunswick, Canada, through Nova Scotia, and then a ferry crossing of the Atlantic. This trip will be our biggest undertaking yet. We're able to do this trip with amazing partners like X-Venture Trailers and Red Arc Electronics, and supported by PowerTube TV and Rugged Bound Supply Company. We woke up to an even foggier morning and got on the road early. Our first stop was Lubec, Maine. Lubec sits right on the Canadian border. This little town is the country's closest continental location to Africa. It has a rich history in the fishing industry and is what I would picture any small Maine town to look like from back in the day. We parked it on Main Street and waited for the only restaurant that opened for breakfast downtown, a little place called Narrow Escape, and would you know it, it had lobster on the breakfast menu. If you watched our Nova Scotia series, you know I'm mildly obsessed with lobster. After breakfast, we headed towards the border. A quick bridge crossing onto Campobello Island, and you're in Canada. Only thing left to do is actually make it into the country through customs. With a few occupation questions and where we're going, we were through. Changed our speedometer to kilometers and headed towards our first ferry. Our first ferry connects Campobello Island over to Deer Island. The Hopper 2 ferry was privately run, and with the trailer, the ferry ride cost around $43. It's about 3.1 miles across, and it takes about 20 to 25 minutes. For some reason, I loved that you just drove out onto the beach. It's only a 9-mile drive from one side of Deer Island to the other, where we would hit our second ferry of the morning. This ferry was run by the local government, so it didn't cost us a thing to use it. This ferry connects Deer Island over to the mainland of New Brunswick, and it's only about 3.3 miles. The Deer Island Princess II was a little bit faster than the previous ferry, and it wove in and out of beautiful Maine islands. The thing I love about both these ferries is you can get out, walk around, and get all the pictures you want. After arriving in New Brunswick, we shot up the coast to the big city of St. John. It was lunchtime, so we stopped at Big Tide Brewing Company for some food and a local brew. Had an amazing sour beer, a burger, and Renee had some breakfast. It was time to hit our first camp spot in Canada, located on the Bay of Fundy. We aired down a little bit, turned our shocks to soft, and changed our Red Arc Tow Pro Elite brake controller over to off-road mode. We had 10 to 15 miles of rough gravel and a little bit of off-roading to get to the Bay of Fundy, and we are looking forward to seeing some beautiful New Brunswick backcountry. The Bay of Fundy has the highest tidal change in the world, which means the coasts are going to be pretty dynamic in their looks and how they've been carved out by the waves. We've wanted to camp on the Bay of Fundy again since we were up here last time, and through guidance of a local friend, we found the spot of a lifetime. The weather was perfect, and I was looking forward to just having a relaxing afternoon since we made it here around 4:30 p.m. With the dogs eating their dinner, it gave me plenty of opportunity to make Renee and I a sandwich and upload some footage. The rest of the afternoon was spent relaxing, hiking, and just taking in the sounds of the waves. A quick marriage/camping tip: give each other some space. I stuck down and had a beverage while Renee went up to the tent to go to bed early with the pups. The day ended with a perfect sunset. The next morning started with a decent hill climb with some rock crawling out of the bay, followed by a 4-hour drive to get into Nova Scotia. To gain access from the southern part of Nova Scotia to the northern part, you cross over the Conso Causeway. Once over the land bridge, you've crossed over onto Cape Breton Island. We didn't have to be anywhere till 9 p.m., so I was on a mission to get a lobster roll. After some Googling, we found one in Bedeck. This place is a little slice of heaven. Between the paddleboarding, the sailboats, and the kayaking, this place was the perfect little water town. Right on the boardwalk is the freight shed. And what do you know? One of the best lobster rolls I've had in years. 10 out of 10. The last stop of the day was Sydney Harbor. We took our time, stopping along the way to reminisce on our Nova Scotia trip we took 4 years ago. Once in North Sydney Port, we could see the enormous ferry taking us to Newfoundland called the Blue Patisse. This monster can haul up to 550 cars. You're supposed to arrive 2 hours early before departure. We arrived at port at 9 p.m., went through check-in, and parked in the long line waiting to board. Being there early allowed us to check over all of our gear, run through systems, and get everything packed for our short night on the ferry. Right at 10:45 on the dot, we were signaled to head towards the front of the boat, where we entered through a massive door with hydraulic arms into the bows of the ship. The sheer scale of this thing was impressive. When I say this was chaotic, it was a madhouse dash for people to get on board and find seating where they would be sleeping the rest of the night. About 6 months ago, I went ahead and booked a pet-friendly cabin for us to get some good night's sleep. It was very compact, but worth every dime. It was a unique experience to take a stroll around the boat while everything was shut down. We had launched and we were on our way to Newfoundland. 110 miles and 8 hours later, we saw our first glimpses of land. After an intercom announcement to head back to our vehicles that almost scared the life out of me, it was so loud, we made our way through a maze of campers, semis, and vehicles back to our truck and departed the ferry. After 4 days of long travel, we finally arrived in Newfoundland and Port aux Basques. A little bit to our disappointment, Newfoundland was as covered in fog as mainland New Brunswick. We couldn't help but wonder, would this weather be what the rest of our trip looked like? It's time to start our trip. Just out of town, the fog raised to a low cloud, and we got our first glimpse of the Long Range Mountains region. The Long Range Mountains form the most northern section of the Appalachian mountain chain on the eastern seaboard of North America. A short drive up the western coast, we headed into Stephenville to a little brewery called Secret Cove Brewing. I was seeing a little bit of a pattern with all of the sours on tap, so of course we had to try the local fare. We even met some local travelers from New York State who had been up here for a few weeks already. Heading out and up onto the westernmost peninsula, our destination was a little pin strip of land that had a few different names: Blue Beach, Long Point, and as the locals like to call it, the Bar. This 14-mile-long unique strip of land didn't look like it got any wider than a mile, had beaches on one side and cliffs on the other. And at the very point has a small town that doesn't have any year-round residents that houses fishing boats and beautifully maintained little fishing homes. After stopping to talk to an awesome little family having a lobster broil, we headed back down towards where we're going to hopefully camp for the night. Most of this drive was a beautiful, clear day, but something unique happened. As soon as we hit the town of Mainland, the mountains that overlooked the town had a waterfall of clouds coming over to the ocean. It was apparent we'd be driving directly into them. In under a quarter mile, we couldn't see more than a few hundred feet in front of us. This goes to show you how fast a North Atlantic weather can change. Our goal was to camp at the St. George Cape Point, which was supposed to have beautiful views, but after a little bit of overcrowding, we decided to move on to our secondary backup campsite. Headed back inland, we went to the Piccadilly Head Provincial Park. With potential rain in the forecast, we put the awning out. About 30 seconds later, we had 120 square feet of freestanding coverage. This private little provincial park was family ran, cost us just $6 to camp, and had a family of 3 wild fox. We eat cheap when we're at camp, so we can afford to have really nice meals when we want them. It's hot dogs for dinner. We go by the rule, buy once, cry once. So a few pieces of essential gear that we like is this stainless steel Snowmaster fridge that we can leave in the back of the truck, a good power system to control and power that, a good way to keep the bugs away like this thermocell, and for heat, we love the lava box. We typically time our drives to where we can arrive at camp between 4 and 5 p.m., which gives us plenty of time to wind down and just chill out and reflect on the day. It's time to head up to the Northern Peninsula area. And to our immense joy, we started the day with clear skies. Driving through this area reminds us of the eastern part of Kentucky and Tennessee. Mid-morning, we arrived in the Gros National Park of Canada. main drive through the park is littered with pull-offs and scenic views. "40 minutes into the park, we stopped at Southeast Brook Falls for a hike through some old forest. The tannin in these waters remind us of the Manganese Falls in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I think the pups were tuckered after that little hike. The mountains that come in and out of the park remind me of something I saw from Braveheart, like Scottish Highlands. For most of the day up the peninsula, the mountains are to the east, while the coast is to the west. The roads are amazing, and the views are spectacular. One stop up the coast that you just can't miss is Arches Rock. What used to be 4 sea caves is now 3 that have been carved into a small rock island. We were amazed by how cold and how clear the water is here. Having made it to the northern area of the peninsula, we were able to catch the St. Barb Ferry heading toward Maidenland, Labrador, which is only an hour and 45-minute ride. Another tip is study your maps. We found 2 or 3 beautiful little offshoots from the highway that go along the coast and give you some views that most people just won't see. At the top of the peninsula, we start getting into the northern barren lands. And once we reach this area, we notice some strange things bordering the road. 20 by 20 small gardens. When we stopped for gas, we asked one of the locals, and he called it eminent domain gardening. Families will plant the same little garden space each year, and eventually it becomes theirs, even though it's owned by the Providence. The reason they plant next to the road is when they made these roads, they turned over the land enough to bring enough fertile soil to the surface. At the very top of the peninsula, the furthest north you can take a vehicle is Cape Norman. This area is a barren limestone headland. All around you are what looked like some ancient lava flows. It's such an alien-looking landscape. As we turn the corner to our final destination, like a spotlight from the heavens, a single sun spire pierced through the sky behind the Cape Norman Lighthouse. Besides the unholy plague of pterodactyl-sized mosquitoes that seem to fight all physics and fly in the wind to get you, you couldn't help feel, but these are the places that we overlanded for. Surrounded by limestone shelf rock and churning green and blue oceans, these are the landscapes that I will always remember. The lighthouse was first lit in 1871 and featured a steam-powered foghorn. The station was later automated in 1992. It's also up here at this northern point where we got our first glimpse at an iceberg. And just as we set up camp about to go to bed, the fog rolled out, the clouds parted, the sun came out, and we got a glimpse at why they call this area the barren straits of Bell Island. We wake up on the Northern Peninsula to yet again another foggy morning. I open all of the doors to the truck to hopefully flush out all of the mosquitoes that got in there last night, and then continue our morning routine. Get the dogs fed, let the wife have time to get ready, pack the trailer, and we get on the road. We typically don't let our gas tank get below a quarter of a tank, so it's time to stop in Cook's Harbor to fill up. In most of these small towns, the gas station is the hardware store, is the grocery, and the local meeting spot for all the old-timers. Just a heads up, gas up here is around $5 US a gallon. After an hour drive, our first stop is Lance Aux Meadows. At the eastern tip of Newfoundland's great northern peninsula lies the first known evidence of European presence in the Americas. This is where Norse expeditions sailed from Greenland. In the visitor centers, there's awesome replicas of the boats they would have used. It'll always be on our mind, is this fog what we're going to be locked into for views for the rest of this trip? We head down the path to check out the actual meadows. First thing you come across is a statue called Meeting of Two Worlds. It's a bronze sculpture which symbolizes the meetings of Europeans with the first permanent residents in Lance Aux Meadows, the Aboriginal people. You can clearly see where the original building stood. There's even a site where archaeological digs were happening along with surveying. They've built a true-to-the-times town with timber and sod buildings that replicated what happened here 1,000 years ago. This is also the first known site where metalwork was done in the New World. I imagine you had to get pretty cozy in these buildings. Being here, you can't help but imagine what it would be like back then. The walls are 6 foot thick, a fire pit in the middle, and all they had was family and each other. Miraculously enough, the fog finally cleared. We'd launched the drone from off-site to show what an amazing backdrop it would have been to live here. Icebergs in the bay, beautiful fields, and views for miles. Around the corner was a giant bronze statue of Leif Erikson. Before heading out of the area, we stopped at the Norseman for lunch. Didn't have a huge menu, but what we had was amazing. Just south of the Meadows, there's a little Viking shop with carvings from whalebone, traditional hand-forged items, horn cups, so you know we had to pick a few things up. And out in the bay across the way, to our extreme delight, an iceberg close enough to get to. We're at the end of the iceberg season, so seeing these is a real treat. These are 10,000-year-old glacial giants. Roughly 90% of the icebergs seen off Newfoundland and Labrador come from glaciers off western Greenland. Well, the rest come from glaciers in Canada's Arctic. The clear blue veins through these icebergs are from meltwater refreezing. A lot of people will actually go out and harvest this, and we'll tell you why a little bit down the road. The further we drive south, the more icebergs we get to see. We are told by a local that all of these originated from an iceberg the size of Lower Manhattan. That would have been something to see. Most travelers that we met told us they were going to go check out St. Anthony, so of course we added that to the list. St. Anthony serves as a main service center for northern Newfoundland and southern Labrador. We love seeing all the different styles of fishing boats coming in and out of the harbor. The area was pretty touristy and very packed, so we decided to move on pretty quickly. It's midday now, and we're heading to the last stop of the day, the town of Englee. Just outside of town, wouldn't you know it, we finally see a moose. Even though it's just an adolescent, it's still pretty cool to see. Talk about a quintessential looking Newfoundland town. Half the town in the harbor, half on an island with an iceberg in the background. We found this camp spot on Overlander, but when we got there realized it's right next to the town cemetery. Not wanting to get any flack from the locals or be haunted, we headed up the mountain above the town to our secondary scouted camp spot. It's a great idea to always have 2 or 3 spots picked out on your maps before you go. You can also look at 3D maps on Gaia to know what kind of elevation change you're going to be getting. So we had pretty good warning that this is going to be a decent hill climb. Exploring areas that are not typically a tourist destination will get you to some of the most beautiful places. We almost skipped this area for a different one, and boy are we glad that we didn't. When I tell you that it pays to do research on your maps, this is a prime example. We've made it to the top of the mountain, to the town reservoir, a beautiful lake called Island Cove Pond, quite large for a pond, and set up camp for the afternoon. This is also the first opportunity we really have to dry things out and air out towels. There was no breeze, we put out the thermocell, and it worked perfectly. Time for dinner. Roll that beautiful bean footage. Just spending time next to water at a camp has never been so good. We have the Red Arc Rogue installed in our truck, along with a 1500 watt inverter, so it's time for keeping the wife happy pro tip number 2. Bringing a few comforts of home will keep her happy. Being able to run an extension cord from the truck up to the trailer for a heating blanket will save your marriage. Cold wife equals unhappy life. Close to bedtime, we only had one visitor, a local with his kids playing on a four-wheeler, and another batch of giant mosquitoes. The X-Venture's lighting is also the perfect way to help pack up the trailer, so in the morning you can just get up and go. It's also fair to mention that sunsets in Newfoundland just hit different. We have a pretty long day of driving today. We're heading out and off of the Northern Peninsula region. But first, we gotta get off this mountain. We put our brake controller on off-road mode and take it slow and steady down the mountain. as we're leaving this area, we spotted something special. A 1941 Bombardier. Created by Joseph Bombardier, these iconic Canadian snowmobiles have tracks on the back and skids on the front. Production stopped in 1951, but many of these vehicles are still being used today by commercial fishermen in Manitoba. It has a 12-person capacity, and I wish I could have taken a ride. We're hearing some unexpected squeaking coming from the max coupler on the trailer, so we checked our Gaia maps, found an auto parts store that I had marked, and had that sucker greased up. We're starting our day with a 6.5-hour drive to get back down the peninsula. Just north of Gros Morne Park, we stop in Rocky Harbor for lunch, but the whole town is out of power. We hate to leave this picturesque town, but we head further south. The terrain changes as we head out of central Newfoundland and into the northeastern region. It's much rockier and with a lot less trees. From all the stuff I researched, this is really what I thought it would look like for a lot more of the country. The roads in this area have also declined pretty quickly. This place is a drone cinematographer's heaven. Everywhere you point the camera, you get gold. Our next stop is a truly unique place. The small, mostly abandoned town of Round Harbor. Aside from the conversion of a handful of homes into summer cabins and a lone fisherman who refuses to leave, the community lies still. The government has paid most of the residents to move elsewhere. This is one of 600 abandoned towns across Newfoundland. It's one of those places that I would have loved to have seen in its heyday. Just hanging out here and taking it all in, we heard a familiar sound out on the bay that got us extremely excited. Seeing a humpback whale leisurely feed in the bay was truly a bucket list item. Hesitant to leave that special place, we headed up to our camp spot for the night. The cliffs above the town of LaScie. The name of the town originates from the French fishermen who called it LaScie, which in French means the Saul, because of the reference to the silhouettes of the hills around the town, which resemble the teeth of a saw blade. Another home run camp spot find. Time for another gourmet quick hot dog meal. While hanging out and enjoying dinner, we heard, again, another familiar sound. But this time, it was in a pair. I couldn't have wished for a more perfect afternoon with my small family on a cliff line in Newfoundland with some beverages, listening to whales sing us to sleep. We didn't get up too early because Renee wasn't feeling the best. The next day we drove around the base of the mountain to the other side where we hiked to the overlook to check out where we camped the night before heading into town for some breakfast. There's only one spot for breakfast in this town, and that's the Outport Museum and Tea Room. It has a decent breakfast menu, amazing hosts, and a small museum to explore. We stayed for a while, got some town history talking to the owner, and after breakfast we got a tiny concert where the owners played what's called an ugly stick, a traditional Newfoundland instrument. While mapping, I usually put waypoints for showers for at least every 2 days. In doing that, we found Kona Beach Campground. It cost us $6 total to have one of the best showers of the trip. It's it's also not a bad place after a long drive to sit and have a sandwich. When crossing onto Twillingate Island, the first thing you see is the Prime Berth Fishing Museum. Fully outfitted with a whale skeleton, we would have liked to explore this place, but it was closed. The town of Twillingate was also another place that we had to go see. This town on the bay was full of brightly colored buildings, fishing boats, and icebergs. First stop for me, Lobster Rolls. With Renee starting to feel even worse, I was going to be the only one having lobster rolls for this meal. Stopping at Staghead Brewing, I wanted to have a beer and pick up some beer for camp later. I also left a Country Boy beer that we brought with us from Kentucky for him. And of course, I had to try the sour that was on tap. With Renee's stomach declining quickly, we headed towards our camp spot for the night that I had scouted. We added a few more pinstripes to the truck and trailer getting back to this area, but when we got there, we realized it was more of a dirt and gravel dump site than it would be a camp spot. So I popped the drone up to see if there's anything else in the area. And to my surprise, I saw a campground that I had missed while scouting. While driving around, these awesome people at this camp spot pointed out another one, and we went and quickly set up camp. Because we had four-wheel drive, we could make it up to this spot where other vans and campers couldn't. Renee was not doing well. She said it's a constant pain in her stomach and underneath her ribs, so she went straight to bed. The closest ER would be a helicopter ride across the country. Panic was starting to set in. A passing hiker, which turned out to be an ER doc from Chicago, lucky enough, stopped and took a look. He determined that it was most likely an inflamed gallbladder. He recommended some basic anti-inflammatories, fluids only, and to see if the inflammation would go away by morning on its own. I was grateful he was camping right below us. Sitting and watching the sunset, every scenario was running through my mind. I stayed up prepared to hook the trailer up to get out of there as fast as possible. Sitting there watching the fishing boats go out to sea, I couldn't help but let my mind go to the worst places. This would make for a very long night. With a huge sigh of relief, after 14 hours of rest and a quick run to the local pharmacy, Renee was feeling about 75% better. No more eating poorly on this trip. She'll have to stay away from the fried and fatty foods. Renee got up mid-morning to get moving around, and we went to check out the Long Point Lighthouse. It's one of the most photographed landmarks on the northeastern coast of Newfoundland. Imagine living somewhere so cold that you had to build hallways between buildings to get out in the winter. Both Renee and I can't express how excited we are that she's feeling better, and that we get to continue on our next leg of our journey. With a huge weight off our shoulders, we head back into Twillingate to grab some breakfast. Well, more me than her. With some really nice views of the bay, I had a huge breakfast while she had a bowl of fruit. We ate quick and got on the road. We had a ferry to catch. There are a couple ferries that go over to Fogo Island. It just depends when you get here which one you'll catch. One ferry goes directly between the mainland and Fogo Island. The other has one stop in the middle. We drove onto the ferry that looked like a giant shark's mouth that was opened. This ferry's name is the Beaumont Hamel. You aren't allowed to stay in your vehicle on this one. They send you to the top deck. We got the ferry that has one stop at Change Island. With permission from the captain, we launched the drone to get some better views. This vessel could really move. We Tokyo drift our way into Change Island's port. For a moment, we were the only vehicle on the boat. We had a few more join us right before the ramp went up. Off to Fogo Island. As we pulled up to Fogo Island, we could see the ferry that goes direct between the mainland and Fogo. A lot of the people that worked on our ferry lived on Fogo Island. After gaining some knowledge on Fogo, they let us off. Thanks guys for all the information. First stop is the town of Fogo, but first, some beautiful scenery. Fogo is the largest offshore island in Newfoundland. Many accidental or natural forest fires destroyed the dense forest on the north part of the island, leaving a somewhat rocky and barren landscape. The town of Fogo is an outport community, meaning small coastal community in Canada, and has a population of around 745 people. It was lunchtime. We stopped at Bang Belly. This place took us by surprise with an awesome menu and a modern look. It was fish and chips again for me with a really odd twist: partridge berry tartar sauce. Boom. Just above the town is the Brimstone Head hiking trail, which we'll come back to later, but they claim it's one of the four corners of the flat earth. Not sure what that means, but we'll take their word for it. The town of Fogo is yet again another quintessential looking Newfoundland town. After lunch, we head across the island. Our first stop is a really unique yet out of place building. No, not the church. The Fogo Island Inn. The Fogo Island Inn was designed by Newfoundland-born, Norway-based architect Todd Saunders. This would be a truly magical place to stay. Head over to their website to see all of the things that they offer. Just know the rooms will average between $2,100 and $4,100 a night US to stay here. To visit the inn, you have to book a room. They won't even let you down the road to get there. we head to our camp spot and tilting. The spot we had picked out on Sandy Cove was beautiful, but as soon as we got out of our vehicle, we were attacked by what these guys call stouts, overly aggressive, large horseflies. Even the thermocell couldn't help here. We packed up, enjoyed all the unique Airbnbs along our way back to the town of Fogo to our secondary camp spot underneath Brimstone Head at the Brimstone Head Park. Renee not feeling up to a hike, let me take you on an aerial journey up to the peak. Sure doesn't look like the earth falls off here, flat earthers. Just saying. We spent the afternoon playing around in the tide pools, listening to whales in the distance, and hanging out with other travelers just having a relaxing afternoon. And right before bed, we retreated with a blast of orange from the sky. An early morning rush to the ferry saw long lines waiting to get on. We weren't sure if we'd get on the next ferry. Another travel tip for people with dogs: jump on Amazon and pick up this water bottle for dogs. You can put the water back in it after they're done. This time, we're trying to load onto the Veteran, the ferry that goes directly back to the mainland. And to our surprise, there was more room on this thing than I expected. We grabbed the pups and headed to the top deck. With calm waters and perfect weather, it'll be a great day for a crossing. And of course, Bivy had to meet everybody on the deck. We got the announcement once we hit port to get back to our vehicles to load up and go. It's gas station lunch for us. We had a 2-hour drive to get to our first destination on Cape Freels. In the intercoastal waterways around Cape Freels are these giant boulders left behind from ancient glaciers. We have an awesome drive through the dunes as we weave our way to the beach. Since we were alone in a remote area, we were not going to drive down the beach, but while we had momentum, we made a turnaround, making sure to stop, pointing downhill on hard-packed sand so we can get going again. The Cape Freels area has multiple beach coves with crystal clear water. It still amazes me at the lack of other traffic around here. We had this place to ourselves the whole time we were here. If you're planning on an overland trip, this is paradise for that type of travel. If I'd have known, I'd have planned a whole day just to stay here. But for now, enjoy some slow motion wiener running action. They really do give it their all. Our time here letting the dogs explore, playing in tidal pools, and then just enjoying the perfect weather. If you're going to come to this area, add Cape Freels to the list of places. Our next stop was a 20-minute drive down to the town of Newtown. This quaint little town is connected by bridges over a bunch of little islands. And in the center of town is the Barber Living Heritage Village. Our first stop is at the restaurant for, you guessed it, fish and chips. The village features living interpretation of the life of the Barbers, a well-known and prominent family involved in the fishing and sealing industry in Newfoundland. There are 19 buildings in the Barber Living Village, 3 of which are designated and registered structures by the Newfoundland Historic Trust. Our last stop of the day and our next campsite was only 30 minutes away, down on Greens Pond Island. While crossing the causeway, we could see our future camp spot in the distance and knew that we hit another jackpot spot. Coming onto the island, we saw some clouds chasing us, but we didn't realize how fast they were actually moving in. We quickly set up the awning, leaving the tent closed, no need to get that wet, and prepared for what we thought would be a little downpour. What started as a little downpour quickly turned into a monsoon. "30 minutes later, the storm trailed off to reveal beautiful skies. Only the southern part of the island has homes on it. The rest of the island is desolate, with a hiking trail skirting along the coast, giving you views of shallow, clear waters and surrounding islands and shorelines. Not long after the first wave of rain, some ominous-looking clouds were starting to develop, coming towards us. We had never experienced a North Atlantic squall line, but we got our education today. The temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly as a wall of water rushed straight at us. Just as fast as it came, it went. We were soaked and cold, and the only remedy for that were some hot ham and cheese sandwiches. The calm after the storm also gave us a rainbow to remember over top the town of Greenspond. All in all, even with the weather, when Newfoundland gives you a sunset, wherever you're camping at that time is perfect. We're heading south to another special place. We're heading to Terra Nova National Park. First stop is Blue Hill Viewpoint, the highest point in the park. The guide says you can see most of the park from this point. Terra Nova is Canada's most easterly national park. It's half land and half sea. The park is also a dark sky preserve. We head down to the visitor center, but it's too early for it to be open, so we take some time to walk around the area. The park features endless hiking trails that skirt along the coastline. We found it interesting that the visitor center was privately run. The visitor center had it all. It had a skeleton of a humpback whale, so you can actually get some scale of how big these things are. And Renee's favorite part? A touch tank where you can pick up everything from starfish, crabs, and other animals found just out in the bay. One thing I love about Renee is she's not scared to pick up any type of animal, even when sometimes those animals will pinch the living crud out of you. This place even had a blue lobster. We spent quite a bit of time here in the morning. Got to chat with the local park wardens, do some laundry in their amazing laundry facility, take one of the better showers we've had on the trip, and just get a ton of information on the general area at this well laid out and beautifully placed visitor center. One last stop before we leave the park is the Ochre Hill Fire Tower. With its metal grate stairs, if you're afraid of heights, I probably wouldn't do this. Just before you reach the top, there is a door that's locked, but it's still worth climbing all the way up there, as the views are worth every step. We have another couple-hour drive along the north shore of the Bonavista Peninsula. The drive up weaves in and out of small fishing towns in different coves along the way. The town of Bonavista. Unlike many Newfoundland coastal settlements, Bonavista was built on an open plain, not a steep cove, which gave this town room to expand. We stopped in the center of town at the Quintal Cafe. This was a newer restaurant. They had remodeled an old home and turned it into something special. First on the menu was house smoked salmon, followed by one of the best clubs I've ever had. Just north of town sits the Cape Bonavista Lighthouse. This lighthouse is one of the most photographed lighthouses in Newfoundland, and for good reason. And with our telephoto lens, we finally got a glimpse at a puffin. These are tiny, quirky little birds. These birds typically nest in crevices among rocks or even burrow into soil. They beat their wings 400 times a minute to fly, and they look pretty frantic while doing it. Just northeast of town, we find our camp spot in the community pasture, where you'll find free-range cow and horse. Driving along Lance Cove Road, we find one of 50 beautiful camp spots overlooking small rock towers and a calm North Atlantic. You can't tell me it's not worth spending hours looking for different camp spots on Gaia GPS when we get places like this all the time. While we're here, I want to take the time to show you the gear we use the most. We go by the rule, buy once, cry once. You may spend a little bit more, but it's going to last. We'll start with our 2021 Jeep Gladiator Sport S with the Max Tow package. For the tires, we use Toyo Open Country ATs, mounted on Method 701's bronze rims. For the best ride possible, we use the Falcon 3.3 shocks and the Clayton Off-Road 2.5-inch Overland lift. For a winch, we chose Warren's 12,000-pound winch with synthetic rope and the Factor 55 Ultra Hook. We slapped on the Rugged Ridge snorkel, more for air quality than actual water crossings. And on the inside, we have a mounted InReach Garmin Mini for satellite communications and SOS. And for power management, we have the RedArc Rogue and Manager 30 system. In the back seat, we have the Goose Gear rear seat delete and back wall. This gave us a chance to utilize as much space in the rear as possible. We can screw on or Velcro anything down to this thing. And each side has a cargo bay. On the driver's side, we have all our recovery gear and our ARB compressor mounted underneath it. It's also nice that it's lockable with a latch. And on the other side, we have a 300 amp hour lithium battery, a med kit made from a giant loop moto bag, our GP Factor hammer/shovel, our Elements fire extinguisher. This thing is super compact and lasts twice as long as a standard fire extinguisher. And under the other storage part is our RedArc Rogue, Manager 30, and all of our quick access to our electronics. This system powers, monitors, and controls all of our electronics like our lights, our compressor, and our Snowmaster refrigerator, which we've had running outside in the elements for 4 years with no hiccups. This thing is a beast. Speaking of beast, is our X-Venture XV3, which is the smaller of the two trailers that they make. All aluminum, this thing will never rust, featuring a Truxedo roll top that can hold 400 pounds, and one of our favorite newest features, a pull-out galley with a sink, instant propane water heater, and a stove. Underneath of the trailer is a pancake 25-gallon water tank, heated with an instant propane water heater. On the other side is the electronics, including the RedArc BC-DC 1225 charger, powering a 100 amp hour lithium battery. It's a lot of voltage, so you have to run a separate Anderson connection from your main battery back because the 7-pin traditional connector just doesn't carry that much voltage. The trailer also has full surround lighting and undercarriage lighting. We've matched the 35-inch tires from the truck to the trailer, which means if we really needed them, we could drop this trailer and have 4 full spares. Sitting on top is the Big Country 4x4 Penthouse XL tent. There's 7 foot 4 inches of space inside of this beast, including electric hookups. Giving us 120 square feet of shade is the ostrich wing awning, the original trussed arm awning out of South Africa. We can't say enough about how fast this thing goes up and down. We have a large Zargus case as a footlocker for Renee, along with a secondary propane tank and our lava box fire pit. And last but not least, but really important, are 2 comfortable chairs. You may think this is a lot, but it's actually a pretty minimalist setup for where we go and what it allows us to do. While sitting and relaxing, we heard a series of loud, repeating booms and could not figure out what it was. So I launched the drone to catch 2 whales doing peduncle slaps, or lobtail. We learned that males do this to challenge each other, or male and female will do this while flirting. Whatever reason these 2 were doing it, it was loud. Imagine a human-sized flipper slapping flat on the water. That Renee's health was back in order. We spent the rest of the afternoon reflecting on the experiences we've had so far. What will Newfoundland bring us tomorrow? We didn't find many breakfast spots around Newfoundland, so when we got the opportunity, we took it. Mifflin's in Bonavista was the closest thing to home cooking that we've had. After breakfast, we headed over to Dungeon's Provincial Park. These unique sea caves were a result of collapsed sea caves over the years that have been washed out. This is one of those times we wish we brought our blow-up kayak. This was a beautiful way to start the day. Just a quick 5-minute drive found us at John Cable's Cove. This cove has some pretty unique rock features, including a chimney. We found out it also has a pretty extensive puffin colony. And for the first time out in the bay, we saw a mom with her calf. It's Pretty hard to believe after seeing the size of these humpback whales that orcas actually hunt these. If we had a few extra days, these are the areas that we'd like to stay and camped in. While talking with some locals, they told us the best place to see puffin, well, reasonably up close, is in Elliston. A 10-minute hike, and you're at the cliffs across from an island completely covered in puffin. We sat and watched these goofy little birds try to fly for about a half an hour. Another place we heard everybody talking about was a small town called Trinity. Trinity has a rich history with lots of tourism. A lot of the buildings are preserved and you can take tours of them. The one we were most interested in was the Green Family Forge, an active blacksmithing forge where you can see how it was done back in the old days. The Green family practiced as blacksmiths in Trinity since before 1750. In 1991, the forge was restored and opened as a museum. When we were there, they actually were building a new forge. We got some demonstrations on how the bellows work, picked up a few hand-forged items, and got on our way. Heading southeast, we took the foggy land bridge from the mainland of Newfoundland over to the St. John's area. Our destination is a uniquely named town of Dildo. Dildo sits on Conception Bay next to the town of Spread Eagle. You can't make these things up. Jimmy Kimmel even erected a dildo sign like the Hollywood sign above the town. Our first stop is Dildo Brewing. This place had a ton of fellow van lifers and other overlanders, and a huge selection of beers. We took a seat overlooking the bay, had a few sour beers of course, and enjoyed a quick afternoon lunch. Our camp spot for the night would be northwest of town in a beautiful spot called Anderson Cove. This little area is a great example of why we love having a four-wheel drive vehicle while overlanding. Down the beach, it was pretty packed, full of vans and other campers. This area here, they couldn't get through because they didn't have four-wheel drive or high clearance, so we were able to have this whole end of our beach in the cove to ourselves. The area wasn't level enough to have everything level, but we got the trailer pretty close. Renee took the dogs for a walk while I set up camp. I'm not sure how we keep getting so lucky finding these amazing spots. Shortly after setting up, the wind picked up and it was starting to get chilly off the water. But we put the lava box upwind and all that heat was blasting us. With some Dildo beer, an amazing view of the bay, we sat and watched the fishing boats do their thing. We love the name of this boat. Right at sunset, the wind died down and we got one of the best sunsets of the trip. It even seemed like Bivy was contemplating life and how wonderful it is to be here. Having a trailer so short and nimble makes it easy to get out of these tight spaces. Having a water tank that sits just above our axle on the trailer also helps to keep the bounce down and the center of gravity down lower. It's time to head to the biggest city on Newfoundland Island, the city of St. John's. But first, we have one stop to make. Our DJI Mavic 3 Pro loves to eat through memory cards. And on this trip, so far, 10 64 gig cards. There, you memory hungry jerk. Our first stop in St. John's is Signal Hill. Once you reach the parking lot at the top, there's hiking trails that go all over the coastline and amazing views of St. John City itself. Prominently perched at the very top is the Cabot Tower. In 1901, this tower received the first transatlantic wireless message from the United Kingdom across the ocean. And during the Second World War, this was a lookout for the town sporting some pretty big guns. And if you're lucky enough to get there around noon, this 3-pound Hodgkins gun gets shot off to signal noon to the town. You're even able to take the narrow stairs all the way up to the roof to get even a better view. St. John is also the launch site for the rescues that attempted to go find the Titanic sub that went down. Our next stop is one that I've been looking forward to way before we even started this trip. It's a little brewery called Quidi Vidi Brewing. This is probably the most well-known and visited brewery in Newfoundland. The variety of beers these guys have made over the years is staggering. But there's one beer in particular that I'm excited about. Iceberg beer. Literally made from the melted veins of that blue ice we saw earlier, this is the one beer that I wanted to try. Renee and I got a couple flights, mostly sours of course, and stocked up with just a couple beers to bring back to Kentucky. Next stop is an area in Newfoundland called Jelly Bean Row, where a lot of the houses are painted in bright alternating colors. We have one more stop in downtown Newfoundland before we get out of here, and that is to get Screeched in. And we've heard there's only one place to do that. Trapper John's. The act of getting Screeched in is the most tourisome way to become an official Newfoundlander. And the individual to do that job was named Trapper Bobby. Trapper Bobby is the squirrely bartender who's going to perform this little ritual for us. Listen closely because the accents are thick here. Pay attention closely and follow along on this unique experience on becoming a Newfoundlander. And excuse Trapper Bobby's shaky hands.
So guys, welcome to Trapper John's. My name's Trapper Bobby. Guys, it's going to be my honor to make you guys members of Trapper John's in Newfoundland. What's your name? Where you from? What brings you here?
Jeremiah, Kentucky, and to do this crap.
It's about time.
Renee, Kentucky, and to get Screeched in.
So guys, there's 4 things I'm going to get you all to do. I'm going to get you all to drink something for Newfoundland, eat something for Newfoundland, say something for Newfoundland, and kiss something for Newfoundland. Don't get your hopes up, you're not kissing me, alright? So guys, to get this started, I'm going to ask you a simple question. And you're going to reply with a loud and proud with yes, bye. Are you Screechers?
Yes, bye.
So guys, now I'm going to get you all to enjoy a bit of Newfie steak. Guys, last year, us Newfoundlanders, we managed to consume almost 8 million pounds of this stuff last year. Help yourself. We're the highest consumers of this stuff on the planet. Eat up. You guys got any idea what you're eating?
Hot dog.
No. Bologna.
Yeah.
So guys, you all got 1 ounce of Newfoundland Screech. I'm going to tell you all a little story where it came from. So it might taste a little bit better by the time you get to drink it. Whatever I say isn't going to make it taste better. So us Newfoundlanders, we used to have a lot of codfish years ago. Jamaica used to have a shitload of rum. So we used to trade our saltfish for it. But back then we used to get the sludge in the bottom of the barrels. Us Newfies, we scraped it off with razor blades and we boiled it up. And that's what we ended up with. So good luck with it. So guys, on the count of three.
You screened it?
On the count of three, guys, down the hatch. 1, 2, 3. So guys, now that I know you can somewhat drink like us, I want to know if you can talk like us. It's only 14 words long. The longest word has 4 letters. I'm only going to say it once, so good luck. Indeed I is me old cock.
Indeed I is me old cock.
It's me old cock, not my old cock. And long may your big jib draw.
And long may your big jib draw.
It's close enough. Guys, have you got any idea what you just said? Nope.
No idea.
Good. Have you got any idea what cock would be referred to in that phrase means?
Rooster?
It's better than what I thought you were going to say. Have you got any idea what a jib is?
Something on a ship?
Something on the sailboat?
So us Newfoundlanders, we refer to one another as a cock as a good friend. If my buddy walked in that door right now, I'd say, "What are you at, me old cock?" Every Newfoundlander says it still to today. Me old cock means a good friend or an old friend. Jib is a part that holds up a sail on a ship. So basically what we all just said was, wherever you go, wherever you may travel, may you have a good smooth trip, my buddy. Indeed I is me old cock. Indeed I is me buddy. And long may your big jib draw. May you have good sails upon your wind. So guys, I got you to eat something, drink something, say something.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you guys all kiss worse.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it. You got the tail on.
So guys, congratulations. Guys, you're over 150,000 people that smell like fish.
For the last part, we signed the wall of the bar and headed out to our camp spot. 40 minutes north of town, we found ourselves getting some pinstripes the Newfoundland way. Not caring about pinstripes will also get you to some amazing spots. These are the highest cliffs that we will camp on, over 600 feet. The cliffs above Redhead Cove are daunting. The wind being over 45 miles per hour, I put a couple legs down on the awning just for good measures. It was getting pretty chilly and even more windy, so Renee went ahead and got up in the tent. Just before closing down everything for the night and getting up myself, we had a couple camp visitors. A local police officer and a local fireman out for an afternoon ride. They hung out for about an hour. We talked about the difference between the United States and Canada. It's these small interactions that remind us that Canada is the best place to visit. Sleeping was made interesting by the extreme winds. We were able to pack up our tent and get on the road right as the rain hit. And lucky for us, we had Nor to save us from all the evil trees. Our first destination of the day is something that we can check off our geographical bucket list. Cape Spear is the easternmost point of Canada and North America. There's an awesome museum documenting the multiple lighthouses that have been erected over the years here. And a short walk down from the parking lot is the most easterly point that you can get to. Cape Spear, being a significant geographical location, also was the home of a World War II bunker that housed a couple massive guns that would pop out of the ground and launch a 10-inch mortar 2,400 yards out into the ocean. Heading south along the coast through small harbor fishing towns and water pipelines to reservoirs, our second to last day looked like it was going to be straight rain. Our next stop was a town called Fairyland. We were looking forward to a hot meal at the Tetley Tea Room. This place was surprisingly busy until we learned that there was a dinner theater next door. So we dried off in a quiet corner with a hot meal. During our meal, the rain finally subsided, revealing a foggy, mysterious coastline, full of jagged rocks covered in seagulls. This was yet another town with small community gardens on the outliers. To our relief, the further south we went, the clearer the skies got. We had now entered a very unique area of Newfoundland, the South Avalon Burren Oceanic Barrens. Our first stop in the Barrens is the Chance Cove Provincial Park. This park has one road in and one road out. And at the end of it, a campground next to a berm, and on the other side of the berm is a view of the bay with a bunch of tiny little heads popping out. There were 20 or 30 seals there going after capelin that had schooled against the coast so tightly they were washing up on shore. I could have stayed there for most of the day, but the bugs were the worst that we've encountered in Newfoundland. Within 20 minutes, we had whelps all over us. As we head to our last camp spot on this trip in Newfoundland, we see an unrecognizable sight. Our first look at a churning Atlantic. Everywhere else we've been, the ocean was calm. These are the oceanic views that we thought we'd be getting everywhere else. The deep blue ocean that we've been seeing for weeks returned to turquoise against the flat-layered rock and sea caves. Other areas remind us of Scottish coastlines. Barrens are an understatement. There are no trees to be found anywhere. Driving along this U-shaped coast, you pass through endless meadows full of small ponds. There was also a unique scene where the fog seemed to just hang right off the shoreline. Cape Race, the southeast tip of Newfoundland, has long been an important navigational point. Vessels bound from North America to England, the Cape was often their first landfall. This is also where the first Titanic Mayday was received. Sitting here watching the waters churn were both beautiful and humbling. Before settling in next to the lighthouse to camp for the night, we decided to explore some local trails. We couldn't have found a better place to do some trail running than among these windswept grass plains that seemingly fall off into the Atlantic. This long forgotten about gravel trail that we were on eventually would lead all the way back up to the Chance Cove Provincial Park. But being alone, it wouldn't be a smart choice to attempt it. We can't help but look in the distance and wonder what kind of an adventure it would be to try to get all the way up it. For now, we'll have to be satisfied with blue water coves and small dark tannin streams flowing into the ocean. Getting later in the afternoon when we make it back to the lighthouse, and the wind and waves are starting to pick up. Upon arriving and making camp, we are anxious to try an $18 bottle of iceberg water. This better be good. Having checked the weather earlier, it was supposed to be clear the whole night. But 30 minutes after setting up camp, one of the thickest fogs we have ever seen blocked out the sun. And since we were planning on clear weather, we completely forgot about the foghorn that we were camped directly next to. Not wanting to hear that the rest of the night, we quickly packed up and moved down the coast about 1.5 miles, where we found a sheltered little seal-filled cove. This place was straight out of The Hobbit. The day's landscapes changed from cliff lines to foggy coast to beautiful clear skies along barren landscapes and hectic Atlantic oceans, and ending in a misty cove. We're feeling pretty lucky to be here. It's morning on our last day. An hour of horribly paved road turns us south one more time to the furthest south point that you can get a vehicle to. We're heading to the Cape Pine Lighthouse. Most lighthouses around Newfoundland have been automated, which means the homes around them were sold off to private landowners. So upon arriving at this house, we were greeted by a family just hanging out for a few weeks there. And in true Canadian fashion, they invited us up for coffee. When we say that everybody that we meet in Canada are nice, we aren't exaggerating. Every encounter is like a faith in humanity restored situation. Thanks guys for the hospitality. We have to be in the port of Argentia around 3 p.m. So having to rush out of there, we get on the road by 10:30. What we didn't realize or take into account was Route 91, that was a shortcut across the country, was all gravel and slowed us down just a bit. Our last stop before getting on the ferry was Castle Hill. The fort more consists of the remains of a fort that the British and French left behind. And with permission of the park, we were able to get a bird's eye view of the waters and towns these forts used to protect. Oh, what it would be like to lob a cannonball out into the ocean. You're supposed to arrive 2 hours early before departure of the ferries. We arrived 3:30 to 4. We wanted time for a complete reset before our journey home to Kentucky. We pulled out everything, even the mattress. All the fog and rain had left everything just a bit damp. And as luck would have it, as soon as we packed up, the fog rolled in. 4:45, and it's time to board the vessel. This vessel's name is the MV Atlantic Vision, and it's even bigger than the last one. This time, we were lucky to catch the elevator, so we didn't have to carry the pups up 8 flights of stairs. We booked these overnight, so we are always traveling even when we're sleeping. No time wasted on these trips. The cabins did cost a pretty good amount, but they're completely worth getting a full night's rest. This Atlantic crossing is also 17 hours long, and also so happens to be our anniversary. So, we leave the dogs in the room and head out to the nicest restaurant on the boat to have an anniversary dinner. It's steak and potato for us. And just like on the last boat, if you didn't book a cabin way in advance, you were stuck hanging out in these chairs with everybody else for 17 hours. This overnight voyage covers 330 miles, putting us back into the port of Sydney, Nova Scotia. Waking up at 9 a.m. in our luxury cabin, we got packed and got ready to leave the room as soon as they announced we can go back to our cars, because it is again a madhouse bum rush. We were able to be the first on the elevators and got in our truck. Goodbye and thank you, Newfoundland. We had previously aired down to 26 psi at the turnoff to Bay of Fundy. So before hitting the highway, we aired back up. Turn our shocks back to hard. And to get rid of extra weight, we empty all the water out of our trailer. It's an 8-hour drive to the U.S. border, crossing through Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, Canada. And of course, our trip wouldn't be complete without a surly and salty border crossing interrogation. And one last lobster roll. And in my case, 2. This is a trip that will not easily be beaten. Thank you, Newfoundland. We will see you again one day.